She crashed through the doors of Manhattan's most exclusive criminal hideout with blood on her knees and 3 loan sharks at her back. And that's when Penelope Vaughn locked eyes with the one man in New York no sane person ever wanted to meet. Roman Vescari, the ice-cold king of the underworld, who looked at her trembling, rain-soaked body and made a decision that would drag them both straight into hell. He claimed her as his wife right there in front of everyone, buying her debt and her future in the same breath. And Penelope had exactly 3 seconds to decide if she'd rather die in that alley or survive as the mob boss's bride. If you want to see how an invisible woman becomes a queen in the heart of darkness, stay with me until the very end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this wild ride travels. Now let's begin. The rain came down like punishment. Penelope Vaughn's lungs burned as she sprinted through the warehouse district of Lower Manhattan, her cheap sneakers slapping against flooded pavement while thunder cracked overhead like gunshots. Water soaked through her oversized cardigan, the same shapeless gray thing she wore to hide her curves, to disappear, to apologize for taking up space in a world that never let her forget she didn't fit the mold. 28 years old and she was still running from something. Tonight it just happened to be 3 men who wanted to break her fingers. Her phone buzzed again in her pocket. Another blocked number, another threat. She didn't need to read it. They'd been calling for weeks, ever since Mason disappeared and left her holding a $250,000 debt she never knew existed. Mason Hale. Her fiancé. The man who'd promised her forever 3 weeks before their wedding and then vanished like smoke, taking her identity, her savings, and apparently every shred of decency with him. The men behind her weren't cops. They were collectors. And the people they worked for didn't accept payment plans. Penelope's foot caught on broken concrete and she stumbled, barely catching herself against a rusted dumpster. Her palms scraped metal. Blood mixed with rain. She forced herself forward, throat closing with panic because she could hear them now, boots pounding closer, voices shouting in Spanish, the metallic click of something that might have been a gun. She'd tried calling the police twice. They'd hung up both times, because the debt wasn't owed to a bank or a credit card company. It was owed to the Carrera Syndicate. And in this part of the city, that meant she was already dead. Penelope rounded a corner and slammed into a fence, chain link, topped with barbed wire, blocking the alley dead ahead. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She spun, searching for another exit, but the warehouse walls closed in on both sides like a trap. Behind her, footsteps slowed. They knew they had her. "Nowhere to run, Gordita," one of them called out, his voice lazy with amusement. "You gonna make this easy, or you want us to have some fun first?" Penelope pressed her back against the fence, rain streaming down her face, mixing with tears she refused to let fall. Her whole body shook, not just from cold, but from the bone-deep exhaustion of spending her entire life trying to be small enough, quiet enough, good enough to avoid moments exactly like this. It hadn't worked. The 3 men emerged from the shadows. 2 stocky, 1 tall and wiry, all of them wearing the kind of casual menace that came from years of hurting people for money. The tall one rolled his shoulders, cracking his neck like he was warming up for a workout. "You know what happens when people don't pay Vicente Carrera?" he asked, pulling a knife from his belt. The blade caught the dim glow of a flickering streetlight. "They disappear, piece by piece." "I didn't borrow the money," Penelope forced out, hating how her voice cracked. "Mason, my fiancé, he—" "Don't care," the stocky one on the left interrupted. "Debt's in your name. That makes it your problem." "I can pay you back," she said desperately, even though she had maybe $800 to her name and an eviction notice taped to her apartment door. "I just need time. I'll get another job. Time's up, sweetheart." They moved toward her. Penelope screamed. She didn't know what she expected. Maybe someone would hear, maybe a miracle would happen, maybe the universe would finally stop punishing her for existing. But the only thing that responded was the echo of her own terror bouncing off brick walls. Then she saw the door. 20 feet to her right, almost invisible in the rain, a heavy black door with no handle, just a brass plate and a security camera aimed at the alley. Behind it, muffled music and golden light leaked through the cracks. She didn't think. She ran. Her shoulder slammed into the door and it gave way, sending her stumbling into warmth and cigar smoke and the immediate silence of 50 pairs of eyes turning toward the soaking wet girl who just crashed their private party. Penelope's vision adjusted slowly. The room was all dark wood paneling and leather furniture, chandeliers dripping with crystal, walls lined with expensive bottles of whiskey that probably cost more than her entire year's rent. Men in tailored suits sat in clusters, cigars burning between their fingers, cards spread across tables, guns visible in shoulder holsters like accessories. This wasn't a bar. This was a fortress, and she'd just broken into it like a rabbit stumbling into a wolf den. "Help me," Penelope gasped, rain dripping onto polished marble floors. "Please, there are men. They're trying to—" The door slammed open behind her. The three collectors burst through, and the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. "Sorry for the interruption, caballeros," the tall one said, his eyes locked on Penelope. "Just here to collect some trash." Nobody moved. One of the suited men at the nearest table slowly set down his whiskey glass. His face was all hard angles and old scars, the kind earned in prison yards and back-alley wars. "You bring Carrera business into the Vescari lounge?" he asked quietly. The collectors froze. Even Penelope felt the shift. The way the air itself seemed to recoil from whatever name had just been spoken. "Didn't know she'd run in here," the tall collector said, and for the first time his confidence cracked. "We'll take her outside, no problem, no disrespect." "Too late." The voice came from the back of the room. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Every person in that space turned toward a private section separated by frosted glass panels where shadows moved behind the barrier like ghosts. A door opened. Guards stepped aside. And Roman Vescari walked into the light. Penelope's breath caught. He looked like something carved from ice and violence. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the kind of controlled grace that came from absolute certainty that he was the most dangerous thing in any room he entered. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, probably cost more than most people's cars. Dark hair swept back, jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and eyes the cold blue of a winter sky before a storm. But it was the way he looked at her that made Penelope's pulse stutter. Not with disgust, not with pity, with interest. Roman stopped 3 feet away, studying her like she was a puzzle he hadn't expected to find. His gaze traveled over her rain-soaked clothes, her trembling hands, the bruises already forming on her forearms where the collectors had grabbed her earlier. Then he looked at the 3 men who'd chased her inside. "Carrera sent you?" Roman asked. "She owes $250, the tall one said quickly. "Her old man stole it. We're just doing our job." "Your job," Roman repeated slowly, "is to chase terrified women through my district and drag them into my establishment covered in blood?" She ran. "I wasn't asking a question." Silence crashed down like a blade. Roman turned back to Penelope, and she realized with a jolt that he was waiting for her to speak. Nobody else in this room would have given her that chance. "I didn't steal anything," she said, hating how small her voice sounded. "My ex-fiancé, he took out loans in my name. I didn't know. He disappeared 3 weeks ago, and I've been trying to figure out how to pay it back, but I don't have—" "Mason Hale," Roman said. Penelope's heart stopped. "You know him?" "I know he stole more than money from you." Roman's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Calculation, recognition, the gears of a plan falling into place. "He stole something from me too." Before Penelope could ask what that meant, Roman gestured to one of his guards. The man disappeared into a back office and returned seconds later with a leather-bound ledger, which he placed on the table beside Roman's untouched whiskey. Roman opened it, ran his finger down a page, closed it again. "Vicente Carrera is owed $250,000, he said to the room, his voice carrying the weight of a verdict. "I'll pay the debt in full by tomorrow morning. Wire transfer. Consider it settled." The collectors stared at him like he'd just spoken a foreign language. "You're buying her debt?" the stocky one asked carefully. "No," Roman said. He turned to Penelope, and the world seemed to tilt sideways. "I'm buying her." Penelope's knees almost gave out. "What?" Roman's eyes never left hers as he continued speaking to the collectors. "Tell Vicente that Penelope Vaughn is no longer his concern. She belongs to the Vescari family now. And in 3 weeks, she's going to be my wife." The room erupted. Not in violence, nobody was stupid enough to challenge Roman Vescari in his own territory, but in shock, in whispered Italian and rapid-fire Spanish. in the kind of stunned disbelief that came from watching something impossible happen in real time. Penelope couldn't breathe. I don't understand, she stammered. Roman finally looked away from her, dismissing the collectors with a single glance. Get out. Tell your boss the debt is cleared, and if he has a problem with the arrangement, he can bring it to me personally. The three men left so fast they practically tripped over each other. The door slammed shut. And suddenly Penelope was alone in a room full of armed criminals with a man who'd just claimed her like property. I didn't agree to this, she said, her voice shaking. You can't just… Sit down, Roman interrupted, not unkindly. He gestured to the leather chair across from him. You're in shock. You need water. Then we'll talk. I don't want to sit down. I want to know what the hell you think you're doing. For the first time, something almost like amusement crossed Roman's face. You ran into my lounge covered in blood and begging for help. I helped. Now you're upset about the terms. You didn't help me, Penelope shot back, anger cutting through her fear. You bought me like I'm a car or a piece of furniture. I saved your life, Roman said flatly. Carrera's men would have broken every bone in your hands and left you bleeding in that alley as a warning to anyone else who thinks they can run from their debts. Instead, you're standing here dry and safe with a marriage proposal from the most powerful family in New York. So yes, I helped. Penelope wanted to scream. She wanted to run, but she couldn't because he was right. She had nowhere else to go. And the worst part was the way Roman looked at her, like he'd already decided she was worth the investment, like he saw something in her that nobody else ever had. It terrified her. I don't understand why you do this, she said quietly. You don't know me. I'm nobody. You're not nobody. Roman leaned back in his chair, swirling the whiskey in his glass. You're the ex-fiancé of a man who stole a very valuable ledger from my organization 3 months ago. A ledger containing names, transactions, and connections that could destroy half the syndicate if it fell into the wrong hands. Penelope's blood went cold. Mason stole from you? Among others. Roman's gaze sharpened. He's been running ever since, staying off the grid, impossible to trace. But now that you're about to become my wife, I suspect he'll resurface very quickly. You're using me as bait, Penelope whispered. I'm offering you a deal, Roman corrected. You marry me, play the role of my wife for 1 year, and help me recover what your ex-fiancé stole. In exchange, I'll pay off your debt, give you security, and at the end of 12 months, you'll walk away with $5 million and your freedom. Penelope stared at him. $5 million. Freedom. A year of her life in exchange for never having to be afraid again. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. And if I say no, she asked. Roman's expression didn't change. Then I'll still pay your debt, because I don't let Carrera's people terrorize women in my territory. But you'll leave here tonight with nothing, and when Mason eventually resurfaces looking for you, you'll face him alone, without protection, without leverage, without anything except the memory of the man who destroyed your life and got away with it. The words hit like a fist to the stomach. Because Roman was right. Mason had stolen everything from her, her money, her future, her ability to trust anyone ever again. And he'd done it without a single consequence. And here was a man offering her the chance to take something back. Even if it meant stepping into a world she didn't understand. Even if it meant marrying a monster. Penelope looked around the room, at the guards standing silent along the walls, at the wealth dripping from every surface, at the brutal elegance of a life built on violence and control. Then she looked at Roman Vescari, the man who'd saved her and threatened her in the same breath. 1 year, she said. 1 year, Roman confirmed, and then I'm free. Completely. Penelope took a breath that felt like stepping off a cliff. Okay? Roman smiled, not warmly, but with satisfaction, like he'd just won a negotiation he'd been planning for months. He stood, pulled a phone from his jacket, and made a call that lasted exactly 10 seconds. My attorney will have the contract ready by morning, he said. Tonight you'll stay in one of my properties under guard. Tomorrow, we'll make the engagement official. Just like that? Penelope asked, still reeling. Just like that. Roman moved toward the door, his guards falling into formation around him like a small army. But before he left, he paused and looked back at her with those cold, unreadable eyes. One more thing, Penelope. What? The people in my world don't tolerate weakness. If you're going to survive the next 12 months as my wife, you'll need to stop apologizing for existing. Stop hiding. Stop shrinking yourself to make other people comfortable. Penelope's throat tightened. That's easy for you to say. No, Roman said quietly. It's not. But you'll learn. He left, and Penelope stood alone in the empty lounge, rain still dripping from her hair, wondering what the hell she'd just agreed to. Ugh. Penelope didn't sleep that night. Roman's people drove her to a penthouse in Tribeca that looked like it belonged in an architecture magazine, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that cost more than her childhood home, a bathroom with heated floors, and a shower big enough for 4 people. 2 guards stood outside the door. She was a prisoner in a palace. At 6 a.m., someone knocked. Penelope opened the door to find a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a leather portfolio tucked under one arm. I'm Caroline Ortiz, the woman said, Roman's attorney. We need to go over the contract. They sat at the kitchen island while Caroline spread paperwork across the marble countertop, pages and pages of legal language that made Penelope's head spin. Standard terms, Caroline explained. You'll live with Roman, attend public events as his wife, and maintain the appearance of a legitimate marriage. In exchange, all your debts are cleared, you'll receive a monthly allowance of $50,000, and at the end of 1 year you'll receive a lump sum of $5 million. Penelope's hand shook as she held the pen. What if I want to leave early? You forfeit the payout and the allowance, but the debt clearance stands. Roman doesn't go back on his word. Caroline paused. He also doesn't tolerate betrayal. If you try to run, or if you compromise his organization in any way, the contract becomes void and you're on your own. What about... Penelope hesitated. What about the marriage itself? Caroline's expression softened slightly. Roman's not a monster. He won't force you into anything you're not comfortable with. The physical aspect of the relationship is entirely up to you. That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. Because part of Penelope, the part she didn't want to acknowledge, had spent the entire night replaying the moment Roman looked at her like she was worth something. She signed the contract. By noon, the news had spread through the criminal underworld like wildfire. Roman Vescari, the most feared man in New York, was getting married to a nobody baker from Queens. The reaction was immediate and brutal. Penelope met Roman again that evening at a private dinner in his penthouse overlooking Central Park. The space was massive. Dark wood, leather furniture, walls lined with books and expensive art, floor-to-ceiling windows that turned the Manhattan skyline into a glowing canvas. Roman stood at the bar pouring 2 glasses of wine, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than her entire year's wardrobe. You look better, he said without turning around. Penelope glanced down at herself, still wearing yesterday's clothes, still looking like a drowned rat compared to the polished perfection of his world. I look like I spent the night having a panic attack, she said flatly. Roman handed her a glass. That's normal. The first 48 hours are always the hardest. You say that like you've done this before. I haven't. Roman's gaze held hers. But I've seen what happens when people get pulled into this life unprepared. Most of them don't survive. That's comforting. I'm not here to comfort you. I'm here to prepare you. He gestured toward the dining table where a 3-course meal had been laid out with military precision. Penelope sat, feeling completely out of place, while Roman took the seat across from her like this was a perfectly normal Wednesday. Tomorrow night, he said, cutting into his steak, we're attending a dinner with the 5 families. It's a monthly meeting where the major players discuss territory, business, and politics. I'm introducing you as my fiancé. Penelope's fork clattered against her plate. Tomorrow? I don't even know what to say to... You don't say anything, Roman interrupted. You sit beside me, you smile when appropriate, and you let them see that you belong to me. That's all. I don't belong to anyone. In that room, you do. Roman's expression didn't soften. I know you hate this. I know it feels like I've turned you into property, but that's how this world works, Penelope. Power is about perception. If they see you as weak, they'll use you to get to me. If they see you as mine, they won't touch you. Penelope wanted to argue, but she couldn't because everything he said made a sick kind of sense. What if Mason shows up? She asked quietly. He won't. Not yet. Roman leaned back in his chair. He's smart enough to wait until he thinks the situation is stabilized, until he thinks you're comfortable. That's when he'll make contact. And when he does? You tell me immediately, Roman said, and we finish this. Penelope stared at him across the table. This cold, brutal man who'd bought her freedom and trapped her in a gilded cage all at once. Why are you really doing this? She asked. It's not just about the ledger. For the first time, something unreadable crossed Roman's face. The 5 families don't trust unmarried men in leadership, he said finally. They think we're unstable, unpredictable. The commission is preparing to appoint a new council member, and if I want that seat, I need to show stability, a wife, a future. So I'm a prop, Penelope said bitterly. You're an investment, Roman corrected. And if you play this right, you'll walk away with more money and power than most people see in a lifetime. He wasn't wrong, but it still felt like selling her soul. Oops. The next night, Penelope stood in front of a floor-length mirror while a team of stylists transformed her into someone she didn't recognize. They dressed her in a navy blue gown that hugged every curve she'd spent years trying to hide, styled her hair into soft waves, painted her face with makeup that made her eyes look huge and her lips look dangerous. She looked beautiful, and she hated it, because beauty had never protected her before. It had only made the mockery sharper, the rejection more personal. Roman appeared in the doorway, and Penelope watched his reflection in the mirror as his gaze traveled over her. You're going to be fine, he said quietly. You don't know that. I do. Roman stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, cedar, and smoke, and something darker. Because you survived worse than a dinner party, Penelope. You survived being hunted through the streets by men who wanted to hurt you, and you didn't break. You ran into a room full of criminals and demanded help instead of collapsing. That takes more strength than most people in that dining room will ever have. Penelope's throat tightened. Nobody had ever spoken to her like that before. Like she was strong. Thank you, she whispered. Roman nodded once, then offered his arm. Let's go. He kicked. The dinner took place in a private estate in Westchester, an old mansion with ivy-covered walls and armed guards stationed at every entrance. Inside, the dining room looked like something out of a Gothic novel. Long table, candelabras, portraits of dead men staring down from the walls. And seated around that table were the most dangerous people in New York. Roman introduced her to each one, cold handshakes, calculating stares, polite smiles that didn't reach anyone's eyes. Penelope sat beside Roman, hands folded in her lap, trying not to shake as conversation swirled around her in English, Italian, and Russian. Then someone at the far end of the table spoke up. So, Roman, the man said, his accent thick and mocking, where'd you find this one? The bakery aisle at Costco? Laughter rippled around the table. Penelope's face burned. But before she could react, Roman's hand closed over hers beneath the table, firm, grounding, possessive. Careful, Victor, Roman said softly, his voice like ice. That's my future wife you're insulting. The laughter died. Victor's smile faltered. I meant no disrespect. Then show some respect, Roman interrupted, or find somewhere else to eat. Silence crashed down, and in that moment, Penelope realized something terrifying. Roman wasn't protecting her because of the contract. He was protecting her because he decided she was his. And nobody insulted what belonged to Roman Vescari. The rest of the dinner passed without incident, but Penelope felt every stare, every whispered comment, every raised eyebrow like a knife against her skin. She was the outsider, the imposter, the fat girl who somehow tricked her way into a throne. By the time they left, Penelope's hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold her clutch. Roman said nothing until they were back in the car, the city lights blurring past the windows. You did well, he said. Penelope laughed bitterly. I sat there like a piece of furniture while everyone judged me. And you didn't run, Roman pointed out. You didn't apologize. You didn't shrink. That's a victory. It doesn't feel like one. Roman turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. It never does. Not at first. When they arrived back at the penthouse, Penelope went straight to the guest room, her room for now, and collapsed onto the bed, still wearing the expensive gown. She stared at the ceiling and wondered how long she could survive in a world where everything about her was wrong. 3 days later, Mason made contact. Penelope was alone in the penthouse kitchen, trying to figure out how to use the espresso machine when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Miss me, Pen?" Her blood turned to ice. She knew that tone, the casual arrogance, the fake affection masking cruelty. Another message followed. "Heard you traded up. Roman Viscari, huh? Guess you finally found someone desperate enough." Penelope's hand shook as she typed back. "Stay away from me. Can't do that, babe. We need to talk. Meet me tonight. Pier 47, midnight. Come alone, or I disappear forever, and you never get answers." She should have told Roman immediately. That was the deal. But something stopped her. Maybe the need to face Mason herself, to prove she wasn't the same terrified girl he'd left behind. Maybe just stupidity. At 11:45 p.m., Penelope slipped past the guards and took a cab to the docks. The pier was abandoned, waves slapping against rotting wood, fog rolling in from the harbor like a living thing. And standing at the end of the pier, backlit by a single flickering streetlight, was Mason Hale. He looked different, thinner, older, haunted by something that hadn't been there before. "Hey, Pen," he said when she stopped 10 feet away. "You look good. Marriage agrees with you." "What do you want, Mason?" "Straight to business. I like it." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I want what I'm owed." "You're not owed anything," Penelope said coldly. "You stole from me. You destroyed my life." "And now you're living in a penthouse with a mobster," Mason shot back. "Seems like things worked out pretty well for you." "Why did you do it?" The question tore out of her before she could stop it. "We were supposed to get married. I loved you." Mason's expression flickered, guilt maybe, or just annoyance. "Because I needed the money, and you were convenient. It wasn't personal." The words hit like a slap. "Not personal?" Penelope repeated, her voice shaking. "You used my name to borrow money from criminals. You left me with a $250,000 debt. You disappeared without a single word." "Yeah, well, shit happens," Mason shrugged. "Look, I'm not here to rehash old drama. I need you to do something for me." "I'm not doing anything for you." "You will if you want me to give Roman his ledger back," Mason said. "I've got it hidden somewhere safe, but I need something in return." "What?" "Money," Mason said simply. $10 million, wired to an offshore account. You get it from Roman, tell him it's for charity or shopping or whatever rich mob wives spend money on, and we make the exchange. Everybody wins. Penelope stared at him in disbelief. "You think I'm going to steal from Roman Viscari?" "I think you're going to do whatever it takes to keep your new life intact," Mason said. "Because if Roman finds out you came here tonight without telling him, he's going to realize you're not the loyal little wife he thought he bought. And then what happens to your fancy contract?" The threat hung in the air like poison. 2 weeks, Mason continued. "Get me the money, and I'll give Roman his ledger. Refuse, and I'll make sure everyone knows you've been lying to him from the start." Before Penelope could respond, headlights cut through the fog. Mason's face went white. "Shit," he muttered, already backing away. "You brought him?" "I didn't." But Mason was already running, disappearing into the shadows as a black SUV pulled onto the pier. The door opened. Roman stepped out. And from the look on his face, Penelope knew she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. Roman didn't say a word as he walked toward her. Penelope's entire body locked up, every muscle, every breath, every survival instinct screaming at her to run, even though there was nowhere left to go. The fog rolled across the pier in thick waves, turning the streetlights into blurred halos, and Roman moved through it like something inevitable, like death in a tailored suit. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the muscle ticking in his jaw, close enough to see the cold fury burning behind those ice-blue eyes. "Get in the car," he said quietly. "Roman, I can explain. Get in the car." Penelope's legs moved before her brain caught up, carrying her past him toward the SUV where 2 of his guards stood with expressions carved from stone. She climbed into the back seat, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip the door handle. Roman slid in beside her. The door slammed shut. The driver pulled away from the pier without a word, and the silence inside that vehicle felt like something alive. Thick and suffocating, pressing against Penelope's chest until she thought her ribs might crack. She opened her mouth to speak. "Don't!" Roman said, still staring straight ahead. Not yet. So Penelope sat there in her jeans and hoodie, the same shapeless clothes she'd worn to sneak out, and watched the city blur past the tinted windows while her pulse hammered in her throat. They didn't go back to the penthouse. Instead, the SUV turned into an underground parking garage beneath a building Penelope didn't recognize, descending level after level until they reached a section blocked off by heavy security doors. Roman's guards opened them without question. The car stopped. Roman got out. Penelope followed, because what else was she supposed to do? They walked through a corridor lined with concrete and exposed pipes. Industrial, cold, the kind of place where screams wouldn't travel. Penelope's imagination ran wild with every step, picturing all the ways this could end badly. Roman pushed open a steel door. Inside was an office, sparse, functional, just a desk and 2 chairs, and a wall of security monitors showing camera feeds from across the city. Sit, Roman said. Penelope sat. Roman paced for a moment, his hands flexed at his sides like he was physically restraining himself from doing something violent. Then he stopped, turned, and looked at her with an expression that made her stomach drop. You signed a contract, he said, his voice dangerously calm. Do you remember what it said? Yes. Then tell me. Penelope swallowed hard. That I would live with you, attend events as your wife, and help you find Mason in exchange for protection and payment. And what else? Her throat closed. That if I compromised your organization in any way, the contract would be void. Right. Roman braced both hands on the desk and leaned forward, his face inches from hers. So explain to me why the hell you went to meet your ex-fiancé in the middle of the night without telling me. He contacted me, Penelope said quickly. He sent me a text and said he'd disappear forever if I didn't meet him alone. And you believed him? I wanted answers. You wanted to play hero, Roman snapped. You thought you could handle Mason yourself, prove you didn't need protection, and instead you walked straight into a trap. It wasn't a trap. He threatened you, Roman interrupted. I heard the whole conversation. We've had your phone tapped since the day you signed the contract. Penelope's blood went cold. You've been listening to my calls? Every single one. Roman's expression didn't change. Did you really think I'd let you wander around the city unsupervised? You're bait, Penelope. That was always the plan. But bait only works when it's controlled. The words hit like a slap. So what am I then? Penelope asked bitterly. A prisoner? A puppet? You're my wife, Roman said flatly, or you will be in 2 weeks. And that means your safety is my responsibility whether you like it or not. I didn't ask for your protection. You ran into my lounge covered in blood and begging for help, Roman shot back. That's exactly what you asked for. Penelope wanted to argue, but the truth sat heavy in her chest like a stone. He was right. She'd made a choice that night, and now she was living with the consequences. What did Mason want? Roman asked, his tone shifting slightly, still cold, but no longer furious. Money, Penelope admitted. $10 million. He said he'd trade it for the ledger. Roman's jaw tightened. And you were going to tell me this when? I don't know, Penelope said honestly. I panicked. He said if I told you about the meeting, he'd make sure you knew I'd been lying, and then I'd void the contract and you'd lose everything, Roman finished. So instead you decided to risk getting yourself killed. I wasn't going to die on a pier. No, Roman agreed. You were going to get taken, held hostage, used as leverage to force me into a deal that would have destroyed everything I've built. The certainty in his voice made Penelope's skin crawl. How do you know? She asked quietly. Because that's what I would do. Roman straightened, running a hand through his hair. Mason's not stupid. He knows he can't just walk up to me and demand money, but if he had you, if he could prove I cared enough to pay a ransom, that's worth more than $10 million. That's power. Penelope's hands curled into fists in her lap. So what happens now? Roman stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. Bring him in, he said. 5 minutes later, the door opened and 2 guards dragged someone into the room. A man in his 30s, bruised and bleeding, zip-tied to a chair with duct tape over his mouth. Penelope's heart stopped. It wasn't Mason, but she recognized him anyway, one of the collectors from the night she'd run into Roman's lounge, the stocky one who'd grabbed her arm hard enough to leave bruises. Roman walked over to him slowly, hands in his pockets, looking almost bored. "This is Luis Hernandez," Roman said. "He works for Vicente Carrera. And about 6 hours ago, he tried to sell information about you to a Russian buyer for $50,000. Penelope's stomach lurched. Roman ripped the duct tape off Luis's mouth. The man gasped, blood dripping from his split lip. I swear, I didn't tell them anything." "You told them where she was staying," Roman interrupted. "You told them her schedule. You told them she was worth taking. They were going to kill me if I didn't." Roman punched him. The impact echoed through the room like a gunshot. Luis's head snapped back, blood spraying across the concrete floor, and Penelope flinched so hard she nearly fell out of her chair. "Roman, stop!" "This is what happens when people betray me," Roman said without looking at her. "This is the world you're living in now, Penelope. Not contracts and dinner parties. Blood and consequences." He grabbed Luis by the hair and forced him to look at Penelope. "Apologize to her," Roman said quietly. Luis's eyes went wide with terror. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Not to me," Roman corrected. "To her." Luis turned his head as much as he could, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry, Miss Vaughn. I'm sorry." Penelope couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything except watch as Roman let go and stepped back. "Get him out of here," Roman told his guards. "And make sure Carrera knows what happens to people who put my family at risk." The guards dragged Luis away, his muffled screams fading as the door slammed shut. Roman turned back to Penelope. "You wanted to know what you are to me?" he asked. "You're mine. That means nobody touches you, nobody threatens you, and nobody uses you without paying a price. Do you understand?" Penelope nodded numbly. "Say it." "I understand." "Good." Roman walked to the door, then paused. "We're moving you tonight, different location, better security, and from now on, you don't leave without 2 guards. No exceptions." "What about Mason?" "Mason's going to contact you again," Roman said. "And when he does, you're going to tell me immediately. No more secrets, no more playing hero. If you want to survive this, Penelope, you need to trust me." He left, and Penelope sat alone in that cold concrete room, staring at the blood on the floor, wondering what the hell she'd gotten herself into. The new location was a brownstone in Brooklyn. Quiet street, wealthy neighborhood, the kind of place where nobody asked questions. Penelope moved through the next 3 days like a ghost. Roman didn't speak to her except to give instructions, where to be, what to wear, who to avoid. He was colder than he'd been before, keeping his distance like she was something contaminated. And maybe she was. On the 4th morning, Penelope woke up to find a package waiting outside her bedroom door. No note, just a black box tied with silk ribbon. Inside was a dress, deep emerald green, floor length, the kind of gown that probably cost more than her childhood home. There was also a jewelry box containing diamond earrings and a matching necklace that looked like it belonged in a museum. She knew what it meant. Tonight was the gala. The one Roman had warned her about weeks ago. The annual event where the 5 families gathered to show off their power, their wealth, and their alliances. Penelope was about to be introduced to the entire underworld as Roman Vescari's future wife, and she had no idea how to survive it. Uncheck. The stylists arrived at noon. They worked on her for hours, hair, makeup, nails, every inch of her body scrutinized and perfected until she looked like someone else entirely. Someone polished. Someone who belonged. When Penelope finally saw herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The dress hugged her curves in a way that made her feel exposed and powerful all at once. Her hair fell in soft waves over bare shoulders. The diamonds caught the light like tiny stars. She looked beautiful, and it terrified her. Because beauty had always been a weapon used against her, proof that she was trying too hard, that she didn't deserve nice things, that she should stay hidden where people like her belonged. But tonight, she couldn't hide. Roman knocked on the door at exactly 6 o'clock. When Penelope opened it, she watched his expression shift, just for a second, just a flicker of something that might have been appreciation or possession or hunger. Then it was gone. "You look perfect," he said simply. "I feel like a fraud." "Then fake it," Roman replied. "That's what everyone else does." He offered his arm. Penelope took it, and they walked downstairs to where a convoy of black SUVs waited to take them to the Plaza Hotel. Met. The gala was everything Penelope had feared, and worse. The ballroom looked like something out of a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, walls draped in gold fabric that shimmered under the lights. Hundreds of people in designer gowns and custom tuxedos filled the space, their laughter echoing off vaulted ceilings. And every single one of them turned to stare when Roman and Penelope walked in. The whispers started immediately. That's her? I heard she's a baker from Queens. Is she? How much do you think he paid Pussy? She's bigger than I expected. Penelope's hands curled into fists at her sides, nails digging into her palms hard enough to leave marks. Her entire body wanted to shrink, to disappear, to run back to the car and never come back. But Roman's hand settled against the small of her back, warm, solid, possessive. Keep your head up, he murmured in her ear. You're a queen walking into her kingdom. Act like it. So Penelope lifted her chin and walked beside Roman through the crowd, ignoring every stare, every whispered comment, every raised eyebrow. They made their way to the center of the room where the heads of the 5 families stood in a loose circle, each surrounded by their own entourage. Roman introduced her one by one. Giovanni Moretti, old Italian money, sharp eyes, the kind of man who looked like he'd seen every betrayal humanity had to offer and survived them all. Alexei Volkov, Russian, built like a tank, tattoos visible on his knuckles even through the expensive suit. Vicente Carrera, the man who'd sent collectors after her, now smiling like they were old friends. Dante Ricci, younger than the others, arrogant, looking at Penelope like she was something he might buy if the price was right. And finally Marcus Chen, quiet, observant, his expression unreadable. Gentlemen, Roman said, his voice carrying the weight of authority, I'd like you to meet my fiancée, Penelope Vaughn. The silence that followed felt like a test. Then Giovanni Moretti stepped forward and took Penelope's hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that felt more like a threat than a greeting. Welcome to the family, Cara, he said. I hope you know what you're getting into. I'm learning, Penelope replied, keeping her voice steady. Moretti smiled. Good. The last woman who tried to marry into this world didn't last 6 months. Roman's expression went ice cold. Careful, Giovanni. That sounds like a threat. Not a threat, Moretti said easily. Just history. The tension between them crackled like lightning. Before anyone could respond, Alexei Volkov laughed, a booming sound that cut through the standoff. Leave the girl alone, old man, he said, slapping Roman on the shoulder hard enough to make most men stumble. She's got fire in her eyes. I like that. Me too, Dante Ricci added, his gaze traveling over Penelope in a way that made her skin crawl. Tell me, Roman, where exactly did you find this one? That's none of your concern, Roman said flatly. Come on, don't be so protective, Dante pressed. We're all friends here. I just want to know if there are more where she came from. Penelope felt Roman's hand tighten against her back. A warning, a promise, a barely restrained threat. Touch her, Roman said quietly, and I'll break every bone in your hand before you hit the floor. The laughter died. Dante's smile faltered. And in that moment, everyone in that circle understood exactly what Penelope meant to Roman Viscari. She wasn't just a contract, she was his. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced conversations and thinly veiled insults. Penelope smiled until her face hurt, nodded at the right moments, and tried not to flinch every time someone's gaze lingered too long on her body. By 10 o'clock, she was exhausted. Roman must have sensed it because he leaned down and whispered, We're leaving in 5 minutes. Can you hold on? Penelope nodded. They made their way toward the exit, Roman's guards forming a loose perimeter around them as they moved through the crowd. That's when Penelope saw him. Standing near the coat check, half hidden behind a marble column, wearing a waiter's uniform that didn't quite fit. Mason. Their eyes met across the ballroom, and Mason smiled, slow, cruel, triumphant. Then he turned and disappeared into the service hallway. Penelope's heart stopped. Roman, she said urgently, grabbing his arm. Mason's here. Roman's expression went lethal. Where? Service hallway, east side. Roman signaled to his guards and they moved immediately, 4 men breaking away from the group and heading toward the hallway, while Roman kept Penelope close to his side. Stay with me, he ordered. But Penelope couldn't, because this was her fault. Mason was here because of her, because she'd been stupid enough to meet him at the pier, because she'd given him the opening he needed to slip into Roman's world. She broke away from Roman's grip and ran. Penelope! She didn't stop, didn't look back, just pushed through the crowd and into the service hallway, following the emergency exit signs deeper into the maze of corridors behind the ballroom. The hallway was empty. White walls, fluorescent lights, the smell of cleaning supplies and old carpet. Penelope's heels clicked against linoleum as she rounded a corner and nearly collided with someone stepping out of a storage closet. Mason. Up close, he looked worse than he had at the pier, thinner, more desperate, his eyes bloodshot like he hadn't slept in days. "Hey, Pen," he said. "Miss me?" "What are you doing here?" Penelope demanded, her voice shaking. "You can't just walk into a fancy party and pretend to be staff?" Mason shrugged. "It's easier than you'd think. People don't look at waiters." "Roman's going to kill you." "Only if he catches me." Mason pulled something from his pocket, a USB drive, small and black. "This is what your husband wants. Every name, every transaction, every dirty secret his organization's been hiding for the last 10 years. Penelope stared at it. "So give it to him." "Not without payment." "He's not going to pay you," Penelope said. "Not after you threatened me. Not after you—" "I didn't threaten you," Mason interrupted. "I made you an offer, and now I'm making another one." He stepped closer, close enough that Penelope could smell whiskey on his breath. "Get me the money," he said. $10 million, wired to an offshore account by the end of the week. Do that, and I'll give Roman his ledger and disappear forever. And if I don't, Mason's smile turned ugly, then I'll make sure everyone knows the truth about how Roman Viscari's perfect wife used to be a fat, pathetic girl who let herself get used and discarded like trash. The words hit like a physical blow. Penelope's vision blurred, not from tears, from rage. "I'm not that girl anymore," she said quietly. "Yeah?" Mason laughed. "Then who are you? Roman's whore? His trophy? You think any of this is real, Pen? You think he actually cares about you? More than you ever did." "That's not saying much." Mason reached out like he was going to touch her face, and Penelope stepped back instinctively. "Look at you. Playing dress-up in designer clothes, pretending you're something you're not. But I know the truth. You're still the same insecure little girl who begged me to love her. And you're still the same coward who ran away the second things got hard," Penelope shot back. "You stole from me. You destroyed my life. And now you think I'm going to help you?" Mason's expression darkened. "I think you're going to do whatever it takes to keep your shiny new life intact. Because if Roman finds out you came to see me at the pier, if he finds out you've been keeping secrets, he already knows." Mason froze. "What?" "He's been listening to every phone call I've made since the day I signed the contract," Penelope said, and it felt good to watch the color drain from Mason's face. "He heard everything you said, every threat, every demand, and he's been waiting for you to make a mistake." Mason's hand went to his pocket, pulled out a revolver, and pointed it directly at Penelope's stomach. "Then I guess we're done playing games," he said. Penelope's entire body went cold. She'd seen guns before. Roman's guards carried them like accessories, visible reminders of the violence that underpinned their world. But she'd never had one aimed at her, never felt the absolute certainty that the next few seconds would decide whether she lived or died. "Mason," she said carefully, raising her hands, "put the gun down." "Why should I?" Mason's voice cracked. "You ruined everything. I had a plan. I was going to take the money and disappear, start over somewhere new. But you had to go and marry a fucking mob boss." "You left me with a $250,000 debt," Penelope reminded him. "You used my name to steal from criminals. What did you think was going to happen?" "I thought you'd be too scared to do anything about it," Mason admitted. "I thought you'd just disappear, like you always do." The truth of it sat heavy in the air between them. Because he was right. The old Penelope would have hidden, would have taken the blame, would have spent the rest of her life apologizing for existing. But that girl was gone. "You don't know me anymore," Penelope said quietly. "I know you're not going to let me walk out of here," Mason replied. "So we're at an impasse." Behind him, the hallway door opened. Roman stepped through, moving with the kind of calm that came before extreme violence. He wasn't alone. 4 guards flanked him, all armed, all focused on Mason like wolves waiting for the signal to attack. "Lower the weapon," Roman said, his voice soft and deadly, "or I'll bury you where no one will ever find the body." Mason's hand shook. The gun wavered. For a moment, Penelope thought he might actually do it, might pull the trigger and end everything right there in a hotel service hallway. Then Mason's knees buckled. He dropped the gun, collapsed against the wall, sobbing like a child. "Please," he begged. "Please, I'll give you the ledger. I'll tell you everything. Just don't—" Roman picked up the gun with casual efficiency, checked the chamber, and handed it to one of his guards. Then he walked over to Mason and crouched down until they were eye level. "You pointed a weapon at my wife," Roman said quietly. "Do you understand what that means?" Mason nodded frantically. Roman stood and punched him so hard Penelope heard bones crack. Mason's head snapped back against the wall, blood exploding from his nose and mouth, his body going limp like a puppet with cut strings. Roman shook out his hand, flexing his fingers, then turned to his guards. "Take him to the industrial district," he said. "Warehouse 7. And make sure Vicente Carrera knows we have something that belongs to him." The guards moved immediately, hauling Mason's unconscious body between them and dragging him toward the service exit. Roman turned to Penelope. She was shaking. Hands, legs, everything trembling like she'd been dropped into ice water. "Are you hurt?" Roman asked, his voice shifting from lethal to something almost gentle. Penelope shook her head. "Did he touch you?" "No." Roman stepped closer, his hand settling on her shoulders, grounding her. "Look at me." Penelope forced herself to meet his eyes. "This is the last time Mason Hale threatens you," Roman said. "Do you understand? He's gone. Finished. Whatever hold he had over you is over." "What are you going to do to him?" Penelope whispered. Roman's expression didn't change. "What I should have done the moment he stole from me." "You're going to kill him." "No," Roman said. "I'm going to give him to the people he stole from, and they're going to kill him, slowly." Penelope should have felt horrified, should have argued, should have done something to stop it, but all she felt was relief. Because Mason was the ghost that had haunted every corner of her life, the voice in her head telling her she wasn't good enough, wasn't pretty enough, wasn't worth loving. And now he was gone. Roman's hands moved from her shoulders to her face, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "You ran after him," he said, "even after everything I told you, even knowing how dangerous it was." "I had to—" "You could have died," Roman interrupted, his voice rough. "If I'd been 30 seconds slower, if my guards hadn't been watching the exits, Mason would have taken you hostage, and I never would have seen you again." "But I'm fine," Penelope said. "I'm right here." "You're mine," Roman said fiercely, "and I don't lose what's mine, ever." Then he kissed her. Not gently, not carefully, but with the kind of desperate possession that came from nearly losing something you didn't realize you needed until it was almost gone. Penelope froze for half a second. Then she kissed him back. Because somewhere between the contract and the threats and the blood on the floor, something had shifted. Roman Viscari wasn't just the mob boss who'd bought her debt. He was the man who'd stood between her and every person who'd ever tried to hurt her. The man who looked at her like she was worth protecting, worth keeping, worth everything. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Roman pressed his forehead against hers. "We're leaving," he said. "Tonight. I'm taking you somewhere safe until this is finished." "What about the ledger?" "Mason will give it up," Roman said with absolute certainty. "He'll tell us everything he knows before the end, and then we're done." Penelope nodded. Roman took her hand and led her back through the maze of corridors, past curious staff members and security guards who quickly looked away, out into the cold night air where their convoy waited. They drove for 2 hours. Out of the city. Through suburbs and farmland. Until finally they pulled up to a massive estate hidden behind iron gates and towering walls. A fortress disguised as a mansion. "What is this place?" Penelope asked as they walked through the front doors into a foyer that looked like it belonged in a palace. "Viscari family home," Roman said. "Built by my grandfather. The safest location in the entire state." He led her upstairs to a bedroom suite that was bigger than her old apartment. King-sized bed, fireplace, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking acres of forest. "You'll stay here until Mason talks," Roman said. No one gets in or out without my permission. What about you? I have work to do. Roman moved toward the door, then paused. But I'll be back before morning. Roman! He turned. Penelope crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him before she could second-guess the impulse. Roman stiffened for a moment. Then his arms came around her, pulling her close, holding her like she was something precious instead of purchased. Thank you, Penelope whispered against his chest, for saving me. Again. Roman's hand moved to the back of her head, fingers tangling in her hair. You're my wife, he said quietly. Saving you isn't optional. When he finally left, Penelope stood alone in that enormous bedroom and realized with startling clarity that somewhere along the way the contract had stopped mattering. She'd stopped thinking about the money, the timeline, the escape plan, because for the first time in her life she felt safe. And the man who made her feel that way was the most dangerous person she'd ever met. Mason broke in under 6 hours. Penelope learned about it the next morning when Roman returned looking like he hadn't slept, blood on his shirt cuffs, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. He gave up the ledger, Roman said, pouring himself 3 fingers of whiskey, even though it was barely 9 a.m. And the names of everyone he sold information to, Carrera, the Russians, even a few federal agents. What happens to him now? He's Carrera's problem, Roman said. I kept my end of the deal, turned him over with all the evidence of what he stole from them. What they do with him is their business. Penelope sat on the edge of the bed, processing. So it's over. Almost. Roman drained his glass. There's one more thing. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather-bound contract, the same one Penelope had signed weeks ago. Then he walked over to the fireplace and threw it in. The flames caught immediately, paper curling and blackening, her signature disappearing into smoke and ash. What are you doing? Penelope asked, her heart hammering. Roman turned to face her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain, vulnerable. The contract was a lie, he said. I told myself I needed a wife for political reasons, for stability, for power. But the truth is, I chose you because the moment you crashed into my lounge covered in blood and refusing to break, I knew you were different. Penelope couldn't breathe. Different how? Strong, Roman said. Real. The kind of person who survives hell and comes out sharper instead of shattered. He crossed the room and knelt in front of her, the most powerful man in New York, on his knees. There's no contract anymore, Roman said hoarsely. No arrangement, no expiration date. If you want to leave, I'll give you the $5 million and you'll never see me again. And if I stay? Roman looked up at her with raw desperation, burning behind those ice-blue eyes. Then you stay because you want to. Not because you're trapped. Not because you're afraid. But because you choose me the same way I'm choosing you. Penelope's vision blurred, not from fear, from the overwhelming realization that the monster everyone else feared was offering her the one thing she'd never had, a choice. I don't want the money, she whispered. Roman's hands tightened on her knees. I want you, Penelope continued, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. I want this, whatever this is. I want to stop pretending it's just business and admit that She couldn't finish, couldn't say the words out loud, but Roman understood. He surged up and kissed her like she was oxygen, and he'd been drowning, and Penelope kissed him back with everything she had. All the fear, all the relief, all the desperate need to finally be wanted exactly as she was. When they broke apart, both gasping, Roman pressed his forehead against hers. Then you're mine, he said. Not because I bought you, but because you chose me. I choose you, Penelope whispered, and for the first time in her life, she felt free. Penelope woke 3 hours later wrapped in silk sheets that smelled like cedar and smoke, her body still humming with the memory of Roman's hands on her skin. The bedroom was empty. Sunlight cut through the curtains in sharp golden lines, painting the hardwood floor in patterns that looked almost peaceful. For a moment, just one fragile, stupid moment, Penelope let herself believe that everything had actually worked out, that Mason was gone, that the contract was burned, that she'd chosen Roman and he'd chosen her back, and somehow that was enough to erase all the violence and lies that had brought them together. Then her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. Penelope's stomach dropped. She picked it up, her hands already shaking, and saw a single text message that made her blood turn to ice. Ask Roman about Isabella. No signature. No context. Just those 4 words and a photograph attached. An old picture, edges blurred with age, showing Roman standing beside a woman in a white dress. They were younger, maybe 10 years ago, and the woman was beautiful in that effortless way that made Penelope's chest tighten with familiar inadequacy. Dark hair, sharp cheekbones, the kind of body that looked perfect in anything, and Roman's arm was around her waist with the same possessive grip he used on Penelope. She stared at the image until her vision blurred. Then she threw on clothes, jeans, sweater, the shapeless armor she'd worn before Roman transformed her into someone else, and went looking for answers. Bombais. The estate was massive during daylight, all stone corridors and oil paintings of dead Viscari men staring down with cold judgment. Penelope followed voices to a study on the first floor where Roman stood behind a desk covered in documents, talking in rapid Italian to 3 men she didn't recognize. He looked up when she entered. His expression shifted immediately, from business to concern in less than a second. "Penelope," he said, switching to English, "you should be resting. Who's Isabella?" The room went silent. The 3 men exchanged glances. Roman's jaw tightened. "Excuse us," he said to them. They left without argument, closing the door behind them with a soft click that felt too loud in the sudden quiet. Roman walked around the desk slowly, hands in his pockets, his expression carefully neutral in a way that made Penelope's skin crawl. "Where did you hear that name?" he asked. "Someone sent me a picture." Penelope pulled out her phone and showed him. "You and her, 10 years ago. Who is she?" Roman stared at the image for a long moment. Then he took the phone from her hand, studied the number, and his entire demeanor changed, from guarded to lethal in a heartbeat. "This came from Mason," he said flatly. "Mason's with Carrera," Penelope reminded him. I said I handed him over," Roman interrupted. "I didn't say Carrera killed him yet." The implication hung heavy in the air. "So he's still alive," Penelope said slowly. "And he sent me this. Why?" Roman set the phone down on the desk like it was something contaminated. "Because he wants to destroy us before he dies." "Then tell me who she is," Penelope demanded. "Tell me why Mason thinks this matters." Roman's eyes met hers, and for the first time since she'd met him, Penelope saw something that looked like shame. "Isabella Moretti," he said quietly. "Giovanni Moretti's daughter. My first wife." The world tilted sideways. Penelope grabbed the edge of the desk to steady herself. "You're what?" "We were married for 6 months," Roman continued, his voice flat and emotionless like he was reading from a report. "Political arrangement. Her father wanted an alliance with the Viscari family. I was 26 and stupid enough to think duty was the same as love." "What happened to her?" Roman's expression went cold. "She died." The word landed like a gunshot. Penelope's throat closed. "How?" "Car accident," Roman said. "Or that's what the police report said. But the truth is, someone rigged the brakes on her Mercedes and sent her off a bridge into the Hudson River." Penelope's legs gave out. She sank into the leather chair behind her, her mind racing through implications too terrible to fully process. "Who killed her?" she whispered. "We never found out," Roman admitted. "Could have been the Russians. Could have been rivals inside the 5 families. Could have been someone with a grudge against Moretti. The investigation went nowhere, and Giovanni blamed me for not protecting her." "Did you love her?" The question came out before Penelope could stop it. Roman stared at her for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "But I should have. She deserved better than a husband who saw her as a political asset." Penelope's hands curled into fists in her lap. "So when you married me, when you told me you needed a wife for stability and power, it was the truth," Roman interrupted, "but not the whole truth." "Then tell me the whole truth," Penelope said, her voice shaking. "Right now." Roman moved to the window, staring out at the forest beyond the estate walls, his shoulders tense like he was bracing for impact. "The commission never trusted me after Isabella died," he said quietly. "They thought I'd gotten careless, weak, and in this world weakness is a death sentence. So I stayed unmarried for 10 years, built my empire stronger, proved I didn't need family alliances to maintain power." "Until Mason stole your ledger," Penelope said. Until Mason stole my ledger, Roman confirmed. And suddenly I needed legitimacy again, fast. But I couldn't marry another mafia princess. Too many questions, too much scrutiny, too many people waiting for me to fail again. Understanding crashed over Penelope like cold water. So you chose me, she whispered. Because I was nobody. Because I had no family, no connections, no power. Because if something happened to me, it wouldn't matter. No. Roman turned to face her, and the desperation in his eyes looked genuine. I chose you because you were real. Because you didn't want anything from me except survival. Because for the first time in 10 years, I met someone who looked at me like I was a man instead of a monster. But if I died, Penelope pressed, her voice breaking, it wouldn't destroy you the way Isabella's death did. You wouldn't lose your standing. You could just walk away. Roman crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. If you died, he said hoarsely, I would burn this city to the ground finding out who did it. And then I'd burn myself with it, because I wouldn't be able to live with the guilt. Tears streamed down Penelope's face. How am I supposed to believe that? How am I supposed to trust anything you say when you've been lying to me from the beginning? I never lied, Roman said. I just didn't tell you everything. That's the same thing. No, it's not. Roman's hands moved from her shoulders to her face, thumbs brushing away tears. Lying would have been telling you I loved you when I signed that contract. Not telling you about Isabella was protecting you from a past that had nothing to do with us. It has everything to do with us, Penelope shot back. Because I'm not the first woman you used to secure your power. I'm just the first one who survived long enough to find out. She pulled away from him, stumbling backward until her back hit the wall. Roman didn't follow. He just stood there in the middle of the study looking like she'd physically wounded him. I'm not using you, he said quietly. Not anymore. Maybe I was in the beginning, but that stopped the moment you walked into that dinner and refused to shrink when they mocked you. That stopped when you faced Mason with a gun pointed at you and didn't beg. That stopped when I realized I'd rather lose everything than lose you. Then prove it, Penelope whispered. How? Tell me the truth about why Isabella died. Roman's expression shuddered. I already did. No, Penelope said. You told me what the police report said, but you're Roman Vescari. You don't accept official stories, so what really happened? The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Then Roman's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and whatever he saw there made his entire body go rigid. I have to take this, he said. Roman, stay here, he ordered, already moving toward the door. Don't leave this room, don't answer your phone, and don't trust anyone until I get back. He left before Penelope could argue, and she was alone again with nothing but questions and the ghost of a dead woman who looked nothing like her. Bob. Penelope lasted exactly 20 minutes before her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a text, it was a voice message. From Mason. She shouldn't have listened. She knew it was a trap, knew Mason was trying to manipulate her one last time before whatever Carrera's people were doing to him finished the job. But she pressed play anyway. Mason's voice came through distorted and weak, like he was speaking through broken teeth. Hey, Pen. Bet you're feeling pretty good right now, huh? Roman's perfect wife, living in a mansion, wearing diamonds, playing pretend with the mob. He coughed, wet, painful. But you want to know the really funny part? Isabella didn't die in a car accident. Penelope's heart stopped. Roman killed her, Mason continued, pushed her car off that bridge himself because she found out too much about his operation. Giovanni Moretti knows it. The whole commission knows it. But they let it slide because Roman's too powerful to touch. Static crackled. And now you're next, Mason whispered. The moment you stop being useful, the moment you become a liability, he'll do the same thing to you, just like Isabella, just like every other person who's ever trusted Roman Vescari. The message ended. Penelope stood frozen in the middle of the study, her phone clutched in white-knuckled hands, Mason's words echoing through her skull like poison. It couldn't be true. It couldn't. Roman had saved her, protected her, chosen her. But a small, terrible voice in the back of her mind whispered, what if he's lying about everything? She needed proof. Evidence that Mason was wrong. Evidence that Roman was telling the truth. So Penelope did the one thing she'd been explicitly told not to do. She left the room. The estate had a library on the second floor, Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather furniture, and a locked cabinet in the corner that Penelope broke into using a letter opener in sheer desperation. Inside were files, dozens of them, all marked with dates, names, and case numbers. Penelope pulled out the one labeled Isabella Moretti, 2016. Her hand shook as she opened it. Inside were police reports, autopsy photos, witness statements, and handwritten notes in Roman's sharp, angular script. Penelope read through all of it. The accident report said Isabella's Mercedes went off the Queensboro Bridge at 2:47 a.m. on March 15, 2016. Brake failure. No survivors. Body recovered 3 days later. But the witness statements didn't match. A dock worker reported seeing two vehicles on the bridge that night, Isabella's Mercedes and a black SUV that left the scene immediately after the crash. A traffic camera captured footage of the SUV following Isabella for 6 blocks before the bridge, and in Roman's handwritten notes, one line stood out. Vehicle registered to Vescari Security, LLC. Penelope's vision blurred. Roman's own company car had been following Isabella the night she died, which meant either someone inside his organization killed her or... You weren't supposed to see that. Penelope spun around. Roman stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Tell me it's not true, Penelope said, her voice breaking. Tell me you didn't... I didn't kill her, Roman said flatly. But I know who did. Then who? Roman stepped into the library and closed the door behind him. My brother. Penelope's knees buckled. She grabbed the desk for support. You have a brother? Had, Roman corrected. Luca Viscari. Younger by 3 years, ambitious, violent, and convinced that Isabella was going to leak information about our operations to the feds. Was she? No, Roman said. She was going to leave me, file for divorce, walk away from the whole world. But Luca didn't believe that. He thought she was a threat, so he followed her that night and rigged her brakes to fail on the bridge. And you found out, Penelope whispered. Roman's expression went cold. I found out 3 days after she died. Luca confessed, thinking I'd thank him for protecting the family. What did you do? I shot him, Roman said simply. 1 bullet, clean. Then I buried him in the woods and told everyone he'd disappeared on business. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Penelope stared at the man she'd chosen, the man she'd started falling in love with, and saw a killer staring back. You murdered your own brother, she said. He murdered my wife, Roman replied. That's not the same thing. Isn't it? No. Roman moved closer, his eyes locked on hers. Because I didn't kill him out of love for Isabella. I killed him because he made a decision that wasn't his to make, because he thought he had the right to execute someone without my permission, because he was a liability, and I don't tolerate liabilities. Penelope's stomach turned. So if I become a liability... You won't, Roman interrupted. Because you're not stupid enough to betray me. You're not reckless enough to put my empire at risk. And you're sure as hell not going to leak information to anyone because you know exactly what happens to people who cross me. It wasn't a reassurance. It was a threat. I need to leave, Penelope said quietly. Roman's expression didn't change. No. I'm not asking permission, and I'm not giving you a choice. Roman pulled out his phone and made a call. Lock down the estate. No one in or out without my authorization. You can't keep me prisoner, Penelope said, panic rising in her chest. I'm not keeping you prisoner, Roman said. I'm keeping you alive. Because Mason's message wasn't just for you. It was bait. He wants you to run. He wants you to leave the estate unprotected so whoever's working with him can finish what they started. What are you talking about? Roman turned the phone toward her, showing a text message he'd received 20 minutes earlier. Isabella sends her regards. Penelope's blood went cold. That's impossible, she whispered. Isabella's dead. Unless she's not, Roman said grimly. Unless the body we pulled from the river wasn't hers. Unless someone faked her death, and she's been hiding for 10 years waiting for the right moment to destroy me. The world tilted sideways. Penelope sank into a chair, her mind racing through implications too terrible to process. Why would she do that? Penelope asked. Because I didn't protect her, Roman said. Because I chose my empire over her safety. Because she has every reason to hate me and everything I've built. So what now? Roman's jaw tightened. Now we find out if Isabella Moretti is actually alive. And if she is, we end this before she ends us. He moved toward the door, then paused. I meant what I said earlier, Roman told her without turning around. I would burn this city to the ground before I let anything happen to you. But right now, the only way to keep you safe is to keep you here. So you have two choices. Trust me and stay, or run and die. He left. And Penelope sat alone in the library, surrounded by files about a dead woman who might not be dead, married to a man who'd killed his own brother, trapped in an estate that felt more like a tomb than a sanctuary. She looked down at her phone. Mason's message was still there, poisonous and waiting, and beneath it, a new text from the same unknown number that had sent Isabella's picture. The estate has 13 exits. I'm watching all of them. Run and I'll find you. Stay and Roman will kill you. Choose wisely. Penelope's hand shook as she typed back. Who are you? The response came immediately. Someone who knows what it's like to be Roman Viscari's wife. And someone who's going to make sure you don't make the same mistakes I did. Then, before Penelope could respond, another message. Check the East Wing, 3rd floor, room 304. If you want the truth about what Roman's really capable of, that's where you'll find it. Penelope knew it was a trap, knew she should ignore it, knew every instinct screaming at her to stay in the library and wait for Roman to come back and explain everything. But the same part of her that had signed a contract with a mob boss, that had faced Mason with a gun pointed at her chest, that had chosen Roman despite every warning, that part couldn't stay still. So she stood up, walked to the door, and went looking for room 304. The East Wing was older than the rest of the estate, all dark wood and peeling wallpaper and the smell of dust and secrets. Penelope climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, her footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. Room 304 was at the end of the hall. The door was unlocked. Inside was a bedroom that looked frozen in time. Queen-sized bed with white sheets, dresser covered in photographs, closet full of clothes that hadn't been touched in years. And on the wall above the bed, painted in elegant script, were the words, Isabella's room. Penelope's breath caught. She moved closer to the dresser, examining the photographs one by one. Isabella and Roman at their wedding, younger, happier, his arm around her waist. Isabella alone in a garden, smiling at the camera. Isabella with an older man who must have been Giovanni Moretti. And then, tucked beneath the others, a photograph that made Penelope's blood run cold. Isabella standing beside a woman who looked exactly like her, a twin. Penelope grabbed the photo with shaking hands and turned it over. On the back, written in faded ink, Isabella and Lucia, 1995. The room spun. Roman had never mentioned Isabella had a twin sister, which meant either he didn't know or he'd been lying about that too. Penelope heard footsteps in the hallway. She shoved the photograph into her pocket and turned just as the door swung open. A woman stood in the threshold, dark hair, sharp cheekbones. The same face from every photograph on the dresser. Isabella Moretti, alive, and holding a gun pointed directly at Penelope's chest. Hello, Isabella said softly. I've been waiting a long time to meet you. Penelope's voice came out as a whisper. You're supposed to be dead. So is Roman's brother, Isabella replied. But we both know how that turned out. She stepped into the room and closed the door behind her, the lock clicking into place with a sound that felt like a death sentence. Now, Isabella continued, her smile cold and empty, let's talk about what happens when you become useless to Roman Viscari. Because trust me, I know exactly how this story ends, and you're not going to like it. Penelope's hands curled into fists at her sides, her heart hammering against her ribs, every instinct screaming that she'd just walked into the trap she'd been warned about. And somewhere 3 floors below, Roman had no idea that his dead wife had just come back to destroy everything he'd built, including Penelope. Penelope's entire body locked up, every muscle frozen under the weight of Isabella's gaze and the black barrel of the gun that didn't waver even slightly. You're shaking, Isabella observed, her voice carrying the same cold elegance as the room around them. That's good. It means you're smart enough to be afraid. Roman said you were dead, Penelope forced out, her throat so tight the words barely made it past her lips. Roman says a lot of things. Isabella moved further into the room, her footsteps silent on the hardwood floor. She wore all black, tactical pants, fitted jacket, boots designed for movement rather than fashion. This wasn't the Mafia princess from the photographs. This was something else entirely. He told you he loved you too, didn't he? Penelope's jaw clenched. He never said that. Smart man. Isabella's smile was razor thin. Learning from his mistakes. If you're going to kill me, Penelope said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded, just do it. I'm tired of games. Something flickered behind Isabella's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. You're different from what I expected, Isabella admitted. The way Roman described his new wife, I pictured someone softer, easier to break. Roman didn't describe me to you, Penelope shot back, because you've been dead for 10 years. Have I? Isabella gestured with the gun toward the bed. Sit down. We're going to talk, and I'd prefer you didn't try anything stupid. Penelope sat, her mind racing through every possible escape route and finding nothing. The window was too high. The door was locked, and Isabella held the gun like someone who'd used it before. You want to know why I'm not dead? Isabella asked, settling into the chair across from the bed, the gun never leaving Penelope. Because the night Roman's psychotic brother came after me, someone else was already watching. Someone who warned me what was coming and helped me fake my death. Who? Giovanni Moretti, Isabella said. My father. He knew Luca was going to make a move, and he gave me a choice. Die and become a martyr that would destroy Roman's empire, or disappear and wait for the right moment to take everything from him myself. Penelope's stomach twisted. So you've been hiding for 10 years just to get revenge? Not hiding, Isabella corrected. Preparing, building alliances, learning every weakness in Roman's operation, and waiting for him to give me the perfect opening. Me, Penelope whispered. You. Isabella leaned forward, elbows on her knees, the gun dangling casually from her right hand. The moment I heard Roman had gotten engaged again, I knew he'd made his first real mistake since killing his brother, because this time he chose someone who actually mattered to him. You don't know that, don't I? Isabella's eyes bored into her. Roman kept me locked in this estate like a prisoner. He barely spoke to me except at official functions. He treated our marriage like a business merger because that's all it was to him. But you? He burned your contract. He killed for you. He's breaking every rule he's ever lived by, because for the first time in his miserable life, Roman Vescari is actually in love. The words hit like a physical blow. And that, Isabella continued softly, makes you the most valuable weapon I've ever had. Before Penelope could respond, footsteps thundered up the stairs. Isabella's expression didn't change, but the gun shifted slightly toward the door. Right on time, she murmured. The door exploded inward. Roman burst through with 3 armed guards behind him, his own weapon already drawn and aimed directly at Isabella's head. Put the gun down, he said, his voice lethal and empty. Isabella smiled. Hello, husband. Roman's finger tightened on the trigger. You have 3 seconds before I put a bullet through your skull. No, you won't, Isabella said calmly. Because the moment I die, 6 different packages of evidence get delivered to the FBI, the DEA, and every major news outlet in New York. Everything about your operation, every crime, every body, every dirty politician on your payroll. You're bluffing. Am I? Isabella stood slowly, still holding her gun, but pointed at the floor now. Test me, Roman. Pull that trigger and watch your empire collapse in 48 hours. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Penelope's heart hammered so hard she thought her ribs might crack. What do you want? Roman asked finally, his weapon still trained on Isabella. What I've always wanted, Isabella replied. Everything you have, your power, your territory, your seat on the commission, and most importantly, I want you to know what it feels like to lose the one thing you actually care about. Her gaze shifted to Penelope. Roman moved before anyone could blink, stepping between them, his body a shield, his gun never wavering. You don't touch her, he said quietly, and the promise of violence in those words made Penelope's blood run cold. I don't have to touch her, Isabella said. I just have to tell her the truth about what you did to the last woman who loved you. I never loved you, Roman said flatly, and you sure as hell never loved me. No, Isabella agreed, but your brother loved me. Did you know that? Luca was obsessed with me from the moment we met. He thought I was too good for you. He thought you didn't appreciate what you had. Roman's jaw tightened. Luca was a rabid dog who needed to be put down. Luca was trying to protect me, Isabella shot back. He found out I was pregnant and he thought you'd force me to terminate because a baby would make you look weak in front of the commission. The room went silent. Penelope's breath stopped. You were pregnant? Roman's voice came out strangled. 8 weeks, Isabella said, and I was going to tell you the night I drove off that bridge. But Luca got to me first. He said he'd help me disappear, take me somewhere safe, and we'd raise the baby together away from your world. You're lying. I wish I was. Isabella's expression cracked. Just for a second, just enough to show the wound beneath. But when I went off that bridge, I lost the baby anyway. So congratulations, Roman. You didn't have to make a choice. Your brother's violence made it for you. Roman's weapon dropped half an inch. Isabella moved. Fast. Too fast. She grabbed Penelope by the hair and yanked her off the bed, pressing the gun against her temple before Roman could react. Drop your weapon, Isabella ordered. All of you, now. Roman's guards hesitated. Do it, Roman said quietly, setting his gun on the floor. His men followed suit. Isabella dragged Penelope backward toward the window, her grip brutal and unforgiving, the gun barrel cold against skin. You want to know the real reason I'm here? Isabella asked, her breath hot against Penelope's ear. It's not just revenge. It's not just power. It's to make you understand what I went through, the isolation, the fear, the knowledge that the man you trusted would sacrifice you the moment you became inconvenient. I would never, Roman started. You already did, Isabella screamed, her composure finally shattering. You chose your empire over me every single day. You let your brother hunt me like an animal. And when I disappeared, you didn't even look for me. You just moved on like I never existed. Because I thought you were dead, Roman said, his voice raw. I mourned you, Isabella. I blamed myself for not protecting you, and then I found out what Luca did and I killed him for it. You killed him because he embarrassed you, Isabella spat. Not because you loved me. Never because you loved me. The gun pressed harder against Penelope's skull. But her? Isabella continued. You love her. I can see it in every move you make, every breath you take. So now you get to choose, Roman, your empire or her life, because I'm walking out of here with one of them. Penelope's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Roman's eyes met hers across the room, desperate, furious, breaking. Take the empire, he said. Isabella froze. What? You heard me. Roman's voice was steady now, cold and final. Take everything, the territory, the commission seat, the money, all of it. Just let her go. You're lying. I'm not. Roman pulled a phone from his pocket and held it up. One call and I'll transfer control of every account, every property, every connection. You'll have everything you came for, just don't hurt her. Isabella's grip on Penelope loosened slightly. Why would you do that? Isabella asked, genuine confusion cutting through her rage. Because she's worth more than all of it, Roman said simply. Because I made the wrong choice with you, and I'm not making it again. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Isabella laughed, high and broken and edged with hysteria. You really do love her, she whispered. You stupid, pathetic fool. She released Penelope, shoved her forward. Penelope stumbled into Roman's arms and he caught her, pulling her close, his entire body shaking with relief. Isabella backed toward the window, her gun still raised, but no longer aimed at anyone. I don't want your empire, she said. I never did. I wanted you to feel what I felt. And now you do. She turned and fired 3 shots through the window. Glass exploded, alarms screamed, and Isabella jumped. Roman lunged forward, but she was already gone, dropping onto the roof of the east wing, rolling, disappearing into the darkness. Find her, Roman roared at his guards. Lock down every exit. Search every inch of this property. Roman, Penelope gasped, grabbing his arm. He turned to her, his face stark with fear and fury. Are you hurt? He demanded, his hands moving over her face, her arms checking for injuries. I'm fine, Penelope said. But she's not alone. There's someone helping her. Someone who's been sending me messages. Someone who knew about Isabella. Her phone buzzed. Penelope pulled it out with shaking hands. New message from the unknown number. Isabella was the distraction. While Roman's busy chasing ghosts, we're taking what we actually came for. Check the vault. Roman's face went white. He grabbed his own phone and pulled up security camera feeds, dozens of them, showing different areas of the estate. On one screen, the underground vault, and surrounding it, armed men in tactical gear cutting through the reinforced door with precision equipment. "How many?" one of Roman's guards asked. "At least 12, Roman said, his voice deadly calm. Professional, coordinated. This wasn't Isabella's plan. She was just the opening act. "Who then?" Penelope whispered. Roman's jaw clenched. "Giovanni Moretti. He's been planning this since the day his daughter allegedly died. And we just gave him the perfect opportunity." He started toward the door, then stopped and turned back to Penelope. "I need you to stay here," he said. "Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me." "I'm not staying here while you walk into an ambush," Penelope shot back. "This isn't a negotiation." "Neither is this." Penelope grabbed one of the fallen guns from the floor, a heavy Glock that felt foreign and terrifying in her hands. "I chose you, Roman, which means I'm done hiding while you fight alone." Roman stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Then, impossibly, he smiled, sharp and feral and proud. "Stay close," he said. "And if anyone points a weapon at you, don't hesitate. Just shoot." They ran. Church. The estate descended into chaos. Alarms blared from every corner. Guards sprinted through corridors shouting orders in Italian and English. Gunfire echoed from the lower levels, sharp cracks followed by screams. Roman moved through it all like a force of nature, his weapon raised, his guards flanking him in tight formation. Penelope stayed right behind him, her heart hammering, her hands slick with sweat around the grip of the gun she prayed she wouldn't have to use. They reached the stairwell leading to the vault. Bodies littered the floor. Roman's men, all dead, all shot with clinical precision. "They came through the east tunnel," Roman said, examining the scene. "That entrance hasn't been used in 5 years. Someone gave them the access codes." "Who?" "Someone inside my organization." Roman's expression went cold. "Someone I trusted." They descended the stairs. The vault door was half open, smoke still rising from the cutting equipment. Inside, the shelves had been stripped. Cash, ledgers, hard drives, everything of value gone. But that wasn't what made Penelope's blood run cold. It was the body. Mason Hale, dead. Shot 3 times in the chest and left sprawled on the vault floor like garbage. "They used him to get the access codes," Roman said quietly. "Tortured him until he gave up everything he knew about my security system. Then killed him because he was no longer useful." Penelope stared at the man who'd destroyed her life, felt nothing but emptiness where rage used to live. "We need to move," Roman said, pulling her away. "Moretti's people have what they came for. Now they're going to torch this place to cover their tracks." "How do you know?" Roman pointed to the ceiling. Penelope looked up and saw small devices attached to the support beams. Explosives, timers already counting down. "We have 4 minutes," Roman said. "Maybe less." They ran back up the stairs, Roman barking orders into his phone, coordinating evacuation, trying to save as many of his people as possible. But halfway through the corridor, the lights cut out. Emergency lighting kicked in, red and pulsing, turning everything into a nightmare landscape. And standing at the far end of the hallway, backlit by flickering red glow, was Giovanni Moretti. Older than his photographs, gray hair, expensive suit covered in someone else's blood. He held a detonator in his left hand. "Roman," he said pleasantly, "we need to talk." Roman raised his weapon. "You have 30 seconds before I put a bullet between your eyes." "Then we'll both die when these charges blow," Giovanni replied. "Because the moment my heart stops, this trigger activates. But if you're smart, you'll listen to my offer. I don't negotiate with dead men. You will today." Giovanni's gaze shifted to Penelope. "Because I'm not here to kill you, Roman. I'm here to offer you a choice. Your empire or your wife. You can't have both." "We've already had this conversation," Roman said coldly. "No, you had a conversation with my damaged daughter who wanted revenge," Giovanni corrected. "I'm talking about business, real power. I'm offering you a seat on the commission, full voting rights, and control of 3 territories in exchange for one thing." "What?" Giovanni smiled. "Walk away from the girl. Annul the marriage. Let her leave this estate alive and unharmed, and we'll pretend tonight never happened." "And if I refuse?" Then I press this button and we all die together, Giovanni said simply. Your choice. Make it fast. We have 3 minutes. Penelope's hands tightened around her gun. Roman didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at Giovanni Moretti with an expression of absolute murder. You're insane, Roman said finally. I'm practical, Giovanni replied. You can rebuild an empire. You can't rebuild a wife, so choose power or love. You get one. Roman's finger tightened on the trigger. Giovanni raised the detonator higher. 2 minutes 30 seconds, he said. Penelope made her choice. She raised her gun, aimed, and fired. The shot went wide. She'd never fired a weapon before, had no idea how to compensate for recoil, but it was enough. Giovanni flinched, turned toward her, and Roman moved. 3 shots. Center mass. Giovanni Moretti dropped like a puppet with cut strings, the detonator falling from his hand and skittering across the floor. Roman dove for it, caught it inches before it hit the ground, and stared at the display. 1 minute, 40 seconds. We're not going to make it, Penelope whispered. Roman looked at her with eyes that held everything he'd never said out loud. Yes, we are, he said. He grabbed her hand and they ran, through corridors, past bodies, around corners. The timer ticked down. 1 minute, 45 seconds. They burst through the main doors into cold night air. 30 seconds. Roman's SUV waited at the end of the driveway, engine running, driver's side door open. 20 seconds. They threw themselves inside. Roman floored it. 15 seconds. The estate disappeared behind them. 10 seconds. Penelope looked back through the rear window. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The Viscari estate exploded. A fireball erupted into the night sky, turning darkness into day, the shockwave hitting the SUV hard enough to rock it sideways. Roman kept control, kept driving, his jaw set, and his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Penelope watched everything Roman had built burn behind them, and felt him squeeze her hand once, brief, fierce, grateful. They drove until the flames were just aglow on the horizon. Then Roman pulled over on a deserted road surrounded by forest, killed the engine, and sat in silence. I'm sorry, Penelope whispered. Roman turned to look at her. For what? Your home. Your vault. Everything you lost because of me. I didn't lose anything that mattered, Roman said quietly. He reached over and cupped her face with one hand, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Moretti was right about one thing. I can rebuild an empire, but I can't rebuild you. Tears streamed down Penelope's face. I shot at him. I almost got you killed. You saved my life, Roman corrected. That split-second distraction was the only opening I had. If you hadn't fired, we'd both be buried in that rubble. He leaned forward and kissed her, desperate and grateful and alive. When they broke apart, Penelope pressed her forehead against his. What now? She asked. Roman's expression hardened. Now we finish this. Moretti's dead. Isabella's in the wind. But his people are still out there. And they're going to come for us the moment they realize we survived. Then we don't wait for them, Penelope said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. We hunt them first. Roman stared at her. Then he smiled, slow and dangerous and proud. Who are you? He asked softly. Your wife, Penelope said. For real this time. No contract, no arrangement, just us. Just us, Roman agreed. He started the engine, and they drove toward whatever war was waiting, together, no longer running from the darkness, but embracing it. Because Penelope Vaughn had finally stopped being the girl who hid in oversized sweaters and quiet apologies. She'd become something far more dangerous, Roman Viscari's queen, and anyone who came for them now would learn exactly what that meant. They drove through the night until the city lights of Manhattan rose against the horizon like a fortress of glass and steel, and Roman finally spoke. We can't go back, he said quietly, his eyes never leaving the road. Not to the penthouse. Not to any property under my name. Moretti's people will have every location mapped and waiting. Penelope stared at the dashboard, her hands still shaking from adrenaline and the memory of pulling a trigger for the first time in her life. So where do we go? Somewhere they'd never think to look. Roman pulled out a burner phone, one of 3 he kept in the glove compartment. and made a call that lasted exactly 15 seconds. "We're meeting someone who can help us disappear long enough to regroup." "Who?" Roman's jaw tightened. "The only person in this city who doesn't give a damn about the 5 families or their wars." 20 minutes later, they pulled into the parking garage beneath a nondescript building in Chinatown, descending 3 levels underground until they reached a section blocked off by unmarked steel doors. Roman flashed the headlights twice. The doors opened. Inside, the space looked more like a military command center than a parking garage. Computers, surveillance equipment, weapons mounted on walls, and standing in the middle of it all was Marcus Chen, the quiet observer from the commission dinner who'd barely spoken 2 words to Penelope. But now, surrounded by his own territory, he looked like something else entirely. "You're making a habit of showing up to my door covered in blood and asking for favors," Marcus said, his accent flawless American despite the traditional Chinese characters tattooed across his knuckles. "At some point, I'm going to start charging interest." "Bill me later," Roman replied, climbing out of the SUV. "Right now, I need a secure location and access to whatever intelligence you have on Moretti's remaining operations." Marcus's gaze shifted to Penelope. "And her? She stays with me," Roman said flatly. "Non-negotiable." Marcus studied them both for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded once. "Follow me." "But Roman, this is the last time. After tonight, we're even, and you don't come back here." They followed him through a maze of corridors that opened into a living space built into the underground structure, surprisingly comfortable, with furniture that looked expensive and art on the walls that definitely was. Marcus gestured toward a leather couch. "Sit. I'll get you cleaned up, and then we talk strategy." He disappeared into another room and returned with a first aid kit, bottled water, and a laptop already pulling up encrypted files. Penelope sat numbly while Marcus handed Roman antiseptic wipes and gauze, watching as Roman carefully cleaned a cut above her eyebrow she hadn't even realized was bleeding. "You need stitches," Roman murmured, his touch gentle, despite the violence still radiating from every inch of him. "Later," Penelope said. "First, we figure out how to survive the next 24 hours. Marcus set the laptop on the coffee table, screen facing them. Moretti's crew scattered after the explosion. My people picked up chatter about a fallback location in Red Hook, warehouse district, heavily fortified, probably 30 armed men. "Isabella?" Roman asked. "No confirmed sightings," Marcus replied. "But she's not the problem anymore. The problem is that half the commission thinks you orchestrated tonight's attack yourself to consolidate power. The other half thinks you're already dead. Either way, your seat is up for grabs, and 3 different families are positioning to take it." Roman's expression went cold. "Let them position. I'll deal with the commission after I finish what Moretti started." "You can't fight 30 men alone," Marcus said flatly. "I'm not alone." Roman glanced at Penelope. "And I'm not fighting them. I'm going to make them an offer they'll understand." "Which is?" "Surrender or burn," Roman said simply. "I'm done playing politics. Moretti wanted a war, so that's what he's going to get. And when the smoke clears, everyone left standing is going to remember why they feared the Viscari name." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying Roman with something that might have been respect or concern. "You realize this ends one of 2 ways. Either you win and spend the rest of your life dealing with retaliation, or you lose and they mount your head on a wall as a warning." "Then I'd better win," Roman said. Penelope's hand found his, fingers lacing together with a grip that felt like the only solid thing in a world that kept exploding around them. "We'd better win," she corrected quietly. Roman turned to look at her, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. Not love, not yet, but something rawer and more honest. Recognition, partnership, the acknowledgement that they'd crossed a line together and there was no going back. "You don't have to do this," he said. "Marcus can keep you safe here while I—" "No," Penelope interrupted. "We already had this conversation. I chose you. Which means I'm done being the girl who hides while other people fight her battles. This isn't your battle." "It became mine the moment Mason stole my name and left me to die," Penelope shot back. "It became mine when you walked into my life and gave me a reason to stop apologizing for existing. So either we do this together, or I walk out that door and handle Moretti's people myself." Roman stared at her. Then, impossibly, he smiled, sharp and feral and proud. "You're going to get yourself killed," he said. "Probably, Penelope agreed, but at least I'll die standing up. Marcus cleared his throat. As touching as this is, we're on a clock. Moretti's people are expecting retaliation, which means they're fortified, paranoid, and shooting first. You need an edge. What kind of edge? Roman asked. Marcus pulled out his phone and made a call in rapid Mandarin. When he hung up, he looked at Roman with an expression that bordered on satisfaction. I just called in a favor with the Zhao family. They've been waiting for an excuse to move against the Italians ever since Moretti tried to muscle into their territory last year. Give them 12 hours, and they'll have that warehouse surrounded. And in exchange, you owe them, Marcus said simply. Whatever they ask for, whenever they ask for it, you pay. No questions. Roman didn't hesitate. Done. Then get some rest, Marcus said, standing, because in 12 hours you're walking into a building full of people who want you dead. And I don't care how many allies you bring, some of you aren't walking out. Checked it. Penelope didn't sleep. She sat in the small bedroom Marcus had provided, staring at her hands, still shaking slightly, still carrying the phantom weight of the gun she'd fired, and tried to process everything that had happened in the last 48 hours. 3 days ago, she'd been a girl in an oversized sweater, invisible and apologizing for taking up space. Now she was a woman who'd shot at a mob boss and survived an explosion that had killed dozens. The door opened quietly. Roman stepped inside, his jacket discarded, his white shirt stained with blood and ash, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in one night. Can't sleep either? He asked, leaning against the doorframe. Every time I close my eyes, I see that vault, Penelope admitted. Mason's body. Giovanni pointing that detonator at us. The estate exploding. Roman crossed the room and sat beside her on the bed, close enough that their shoulders touched. That's normal. The first time you see real violence, it stays with you, changes you. How many times have you seen it? Too many to count, Roman said quietly. I stopped keeping track after Luca. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down like gravity. Do you regret it? Penelope asked. Killing your brother? Roman was quiet for a long time. I regret that it had to happen. I regret that he forced my hand, but no, I don't regret pulling the trigger, because if I hadn't, he would have killed someone else eventually, someone who didn't deserve it. Like Isabella. Like Isabella, Roman agreed, and maybe like you. Penelope turned to look at him, really look at him. This man who'd bought her debt and transformed her life, who'd killed for her and nearly died for her, who looked at her like she was worth more than empires. I'm not afraid of you, she said. You should be, Roman replied. I'm a monster, Penelope. I've done things that would keep you awake for weeks if you knew the details. And tomorrow, I'm going to do worse. Then we'll be monsters together, Penelope said simply. Roman's hand found hers in the darkness, fingers intertwining with a grip that felt like a promise and a warning all at once. I never told you this, he said quietly, but the night you crashed into my lounge, I was planning to leave New York. Sell everything, disappear, start over somewhere nobody knew the Viscari name. I was tired, done with the wars and the betrayals and the endless fight to maintain power. What changed? You did, Roman said. You looked at me like I was a person instead of a weapon, and for the first time in 10 years I remembered what it felt like to want something more than survival. Penelope's throat tightened. What did you want? Roman turned to face her fully, his eyes holding hers in the dim light. A reason to stay, a reason to fight, something worth protecting that wasn't just territory or reputation. He reached up and traced the line of her jaw with his thumb, the touch gentle despite the violence he carried in every other part of his body. I found that reason, he said, even if it means burning down everything I've built to keep her safe. Penelope's hands moved to his face, pulling him closer until their foreheads touched. I don't want you to burn down your empire for me. Too late, Roman whispered. Already done. He kissed her then, not with the desperate possession of someone claiming property, but with the raw honesty of someone who'd finally stopped lying to himself about what he wanted. And Penelope kissed him back, pouring everything she couldn't say into the contact, all the fear and gratitude and terrifying hope that maybe, somehow, they could survive this together. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Roman pressed his face against her neck. "If something happens tomorrow," he said quietly, "if I don't make it out—" "Don't!" Penelope interrupted. "Don't say it, because we're both walking out of that warehouse, and then we're going to figure out what happens next." Roman pulled back enough to look at her. "You really believe that?" "I have to," Penelope said, "because the alternative is unacceptable." They held each other in the darkness until exhaustion finally dragged them under, two people who'd survived hell and were about to walk back into it by choice. 12 hours later, they stood outside a warehouse in Red Hook as the sun bled orange across the East River. Roman wore tactical gear borrowed from Marcus's armory, a bulletproof vest visible beneath his jacket, weapons holstered at his hip and ankle. Penelope wore similar equipment, though the vest felt too heavy and the gun at her side felt like a foreign object she still didn't know how to use properly. Around them, 20 men from the Zhao family moved into position, silent, professional, deadly. Marcus stood beside Roman, speaking in low tones. "My people confirmed 32 hostiles inside. 2 on the roof, 4 at ground-level exits, the rest clustered in the main floor. They're expecting an assault, but they're not expecting this level of coordination." "What about Isabella?" Roman asked. "No sign of her," Marcus said. "Either she's not with them or she's already gone to ground somewhere else." Roman nodded once, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to Penelope. "Last chance to stay in the car." "Not a chance," Penelope said, checking her weapon the way Marcus had taught her an hour ago. Magazine, chamber, safety. Her hands didn't shake anymore. Roman studied her for a moment, then leaned in and kissed her forehead. "Stay behind me. Don't take unnecessary risks. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" "Understood," Penelope lied. Roman knew it was a lie. She could see it in his eyes, but he didn't argue. Marcus gave the signal. The assault began. The warehouse doors exploded inward with controlled charges that sent wood and metal flying like shrapnel. Zhao family soldiers poured through the openings with military precision, weapons raised, moving in coordinated teams that swept through the ground floor with brutal efficiency. Gunfire erupted immediately. Roman moved through the chaos like he'd been born for it, his weapon an extension of his body, each shot precise and lethal. Penelope stayed close, her heart hammering, her breath coming in short gasps as adrenaline turned the world into sharp focus and muffled sound. A man appeared from behind a shipping container, weapon raised. Penelope fired. The recoil jarred her arms, but the shot hit, center mass, exactly where Marcus had taught her, and the man went down. Roman glanced back at her, surprise flickering across his face before he turned back to the fight. They pushed deeper into the warehouse. Bodies littered the floor, some Moretti's people, some Zhao soldiers, all casualties of a war that had been building for years and finally erupted into violence that would reshape the city's underworld. Then Penelope saw her. Isabella, standing on a catwalk 20 feet above the main floor, her weapon trained on Roman's back. "Roman!" Penelope screamed. He turned. Too slow. Isabella fired. The bullet caught Roman in the shoulder, spinning him sideways, blood spraying across concrete. Penelope didn't think. She raised her weapon and fired 3 times. The first shot went wide. The second hit Isabella in the leg. The third caught her in the chest. Isabella's expression shifted from triumph to shock to nothing as she toppled backward off the catwalk, her body hitting the floor with a sound Penelope would never forget. Roman was on his knees, hand pressed against his shoulder, blood seeping through his fingers. Penelope ran to him, dropping beside him, her hands shaking as she tried to assess the damage. "I'm fine," Roman forced out, his face pale. "Through and through. Missed the artery." "You're not fine," Penelope said, her voice breaking. "You're bleeding everywhere." "Penelope." Roman grabbed her wrist with his good hand, forcing her to look at him. "I'm fine. We need to move." Around them, the gunfire was dying down. Zhao soldiers calling out clear zones, securing the building, dragging survivors into the center of the floor. Marcus appeared beside them, his expression grim. "We've got 12 surrenders. The rest are dead or scattered, but we need to leave before NYPD shows up." Roman nodded, letting Marcus and Penelope help him to his feet. Blood dripped down his arm, staining his tactical vest, but he stayed upright through sheer will. They made their way to Isabella's body. She was still breathing, barely, blood bubbling at her lips, her eyes unfocused. Roman knelt beside her, his expression empty. "I never wanted this," Isabella whispered, her voice wet and broken. "I just wanted you to see me, to choose me the way you chose her." "I know," Roman said quietly. "Did you ever love me? Even a little?" Roman was silent for a long moment. "No, I'm sorry, but no." Isabella's laugh turned into a cough that sprayed blood across the concrete. "At least you're honest now." Her eyes found Penelope. "Take care of him. He'll destroy himself if you let him." Then she stopped breathing. Penelope stared at the woman who'd terrorized her, who'd pointed a gun at her head, who'd set in motion the events that had killed dozens and nearly destroyed everything, and all she felt was exhausted. Roman stood slowly, Marcus supporting his injured side. "We need to go. Now." They left the warehouse as sirens wailed in the distance, climbing into vehicles that scattered in 6 different directions, disappearing into the city before the police could lock down the area. 2 weeks later, Penelope stood on the balcony of a safe house in Brooklyn, watching the sunset over Manhattan's skyline. Roman's shoulder was healing slowly. The bullet had done more damage than he'd admitted, requiring surgery and antibiotics and rest he wasn't getting because the commission had called an emergency meeting to address the power vacuum left by Moretti's death. The door opened behind her. Roman stepped out, his arm in a sling, exhaustion still carved into his face, but his eyes clear and focused. "It's done," he said quietly. "What's done?" "The commission voted," Roman explained. "I keep my seat. The Zhao family gets Moretti's Eastern Territory, and everyone agrees that the last 2 weeks never happened." Penelope turned to face him. "Just like that?" "Just like that," Roman confirmed. "Violence is currency in this world, and I just reminded them why the Viscari name used to mean something." "At what cost?" Roman's expression darkened. 16 of my people dead, 3 families destroyed, and a wife who's now a target for every rival who thinks killing you will hurt me." "So what do we do?" Penelope asked. Roman was quiet for a moment, staring out at the city he'd fought so hard to control. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Penelope's breath caught. "This isn't about the contract anymore," Roman said, opening the box to reveal a ring. Platinum band, single diamond, simple and perfect. "This isn't about alliances or power or survival." He dropped to one knee despite the injury, despite the exhaustion, despite everything. "Penelope Vaughn," he said quietly, "I'm asking you to marry me. Not because I need a wife, not because it serves my empire, but because somewhere between the violence and the lies and the blood, I fell in love with a woman who refused to break even when the world gave her every reason to." Tears streamed down Penelope's face. "Roman, I can't promise you safety," he continued. "I can't promise you peace. I can't even promise you that we'll both survive whatever comes next. But I can promise that as long as I'm breathing, you'll never fight alone. You'll never be invisible. And you'll never have to apologize for taking up space in a world that tried to make you small." Penelope sank to her knees in front of him, her hands finding his face, her vision blurred with tears she finally let fall without shame. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it. The violence and the chaos and the terrifying uncertainty. Yes, because I love you too, and I'm done pretending that's weakness instead of strength." Roman pulled her close with his good arm, pressing his forehead against hers. "You're going to regret this." "Probably," Penelope agreed, "but I'd regret walking away more." He kissed her then, gentle and desperate and grateful all at once, and slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that shook slightly despite all his control. When they broke apart, both of them kneeling on a balcony in Brooklyn as the sun set over a city that had tried to kill them, Penelope realized something profound. She'd spent 28 years hiding inside oversized sweaters and quiet apologies, carrying the weight of other people's cruelty and her own endless insecurity. But somewhere between running for her life and crashing into a mob boss's lounge, between signing a contract and burning it, between pulling a trigger and watching an empire explode, she'd become someone else entirely. Not perfect, not polished, not the Mafia princess the commission expected or the soft target her enemies assumed. She'd become Penelope Viscari, strong, scarred, unbreakable, a woman who'd survived hell and came out the other side fierce instead of shattered. But 6 months later, Penelope stood beside Roman at the official commission ceremony overlooking the Manhattan skyline, no longer wearing shapeless clothes that hid her curves or bowing her shoulders to make herself smaller. She wore a crimson dress that celebrated every inch of her body, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists, her head held high as the five families, now down to four after Moretti's fall, acknowledged her as Roman's legitimate wife. The underworld feared her now almost as much as they feared her husband, not because she was cruel, not because she was violent, but because she'd walked through fire beside Roman Viscari and refused to burn. Together, they'd rebuilt his empire stronger than before, eliminating the corrupt alliances that had threatened them from within. Roman's organization was leaner now, more focused, and loyal in ways it had never been when fear was the only currency. As for Mason Hale and Isabella Moretti, their names had faded into whispered rumors, cautionary tales told among criminals foolish enough to betray the Viscari family. But Penelope didn't think about revenge anymore. She'd found something far more valuable. Standing beside Roman on a rooftop overlooking the city they'd fought to keep, Penelope finally understood what it meant to be chosen. Not because she fit someone's ideal, not because she was convenient or useful or met some arbitrary standard, but because she was herself, flawed and fierce, and worth everything. Roman's hand found hers, fingers lacing together with the comfortable intimacy of two people who'd survived war together. "Regret it yet?" he asked quietly, his voice carrying just a hint of amusement. Penelope looked at him, this dangerous, complicated man who'd given her freedom by teaching her how to fight, and smiled. "Not even a little," she said, because in the heart of the darkness, the invisible woman had become a queen, and she'd learned that survival wasn't about hiding or apologizing or making yourself small enough to avoid notice. Survival was about standing up, fighting back, and refusing to let anyone ever make you feel worthless again. The city stretched out before them, brutal and beautiful in theirs, and Penelope Viscari stood beside her husband knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together. Not as master and contract, not as convenience and arrangement, but as equals who'd chosen each other in the wreckage and built something real from the ruins. And that was worth more than any empire.